I hope you'll indulge me here, as I take you on a bit of an introspective journey. At the time of writing, I found myself in a place where I feel a need to reflect on the struggles I went through, how I overcame them, and what I can really learn from my experiences going forward from all of this. It all began somewhere in June 2015. I had just finished my second round of university after learning the hard way that I wasn't really cut out for the profession I studied for the first time around. On the day I finished my last lesson of my writing diploma, I caught the train to work that afternoon, only to be told that my services were no longer required. While being a room attendant was not the most glamorous or rewarding job in the world, and I would later realise just how horrifically overworked and underpaid I was during those few months, it still shattered me. For the past 5 years, the residue left over from the global financial crisis has made something as seemingly mundane as getting a job and turned it into the search for the holy grail for many people in my age bracket, 400,000 to be precise, within a greater 700,000 people in general across the country, unable to find work. Mind you, this is just within the scope of Australia, and doesn't account for the devastation this crisis has caused on a global scale. So from the day I got that job until I lost it, I lived in constant fear of losing it and wore the stress in the worst way you could imagine. This had been what I thought was my first real proper job, and one that I had fought tooth and nail to find, that by the time of my firing, I had been struggling to find anything remotely consistent in terms of work, let alone in fields I was actually qualified in, for about 3.5 years. Without university to lean on during these troubling, uncertain times with the growing, obsolescent world of employment and the lack of overall opportunities, I was placed in the Work for Welfare program. Now, I had been here before. Despite being historically proven to be a failed concept, the first time I was in the program, I was writing for a little community newspaper called the Northsider, located in Brunswick. The conditions there weren't ideal, as a large group of people were all squashed into a tiny room with nothing but flimsy collapsible tables and having a replacement managing editor show up every other week. But I took solace in the fact that I was utilising my skills, writing film reviews and sub-editing articles for other contributors. However, the new government that was elected in the time after I had gotten the room attendant job and left the paper made some arbitrary changes to how many days a week you had to do your welfare activity. The Northsider was unfortunately removed from the program due to only being open 2 times a week. I also found out that the Brunswick Council had cut their funding, reducing the paper to having but a small online presence. A community newspaper with a dwindling readership relegated to the internet is practically a death sentence. In the miserable state my articles have become on the website now, all dateless and missing their respective images, is a depressing experience upon revisiting them. Thankfully, I still have printouts when they were first published online, along with the physical newspapers they were originally printed in. So this time around, I was stuck at a charity bin on the outskirts of Keilor. While I may have briefly reunited with an old friend from high school there, it was seldom comfort for the time ahead. Days turned to weeks, turned to months, as I fell into a trance, barely able to keep track of what day of the week it was, and less able to find enjoyment in almost anything that I used to take pleasure in. My days consisted of sweeping floors and stacking dusty books, then going home to search for more jobs online and empty my email of the 25 rejection letters I would receive from jobs I had applied for the previous week. This would be my routine for the next 5 months. An endless cycle of application, interview, and inevitable rejection because I wasn't able to magically pull years of industry experience out of my arse. The word experience became less and less of a word and more of just a disgusting, garbled noise that would taunt and harass me at every opportunity. It felt like it would never end. I felt trapped and hopeless with no way to pull myself out of it. I began to have odd mood swings, feeling quite despondent and upset one moment, then aggravated and resentful the next. By the end of that year, I was forced to go home early more and more often and becoming increasingly erratic and paranoid that I was losing my mind. Eventually, it all became too much to bear, and my misery transformed into a sharp wake-up call when, during my daily commute to the charity bin, I fantasized about turning the wheel and maneuvering my little green Mazda Estina into the oncoming lane. No sooner had the sheer, overwhelming shock that such a fantasy had manifested in my head that I teared myself out of my trance, violently twisted the wheel as if I had actually driven in front of oncoming traffic, and pulled over to the side of the road. Once I came to my senses after what felt like almost an hour of sitting in my car, bewildered and terrified of my own thoughts, I realized that I desperately needed help. I turned the car around, headed home, and booked myself in for therapy at my local community health center the following day. Coming to terms with having depression wasn't an easy process, nor was it any fun realizing how utterly broken I was. I honestly didn't feel like the same person anymore. Thankfully, my therapist was able to deduce that my depression was the kind that can happen to anyone, and that it could be cured. It would take a long time, but it could be dealt with. The simple realization that I wouldn't need to take medication to feel normal again was a relief, to say the least. Through my sessions, I was able to find where it all came from. Arbitrary societal expectations that had been burned into my brain since childhood, the fear of failing those I love and believe in me, and the isolated feeling of being trapped in a flawed, broken system that didn't care, reeling from the ramifications of the choices of politicians, economists, and other incompetent fuckwits from on high who destroyed it. I distinctly remember reading the headline back in 2008. The words, "Global Financial Crisis," screaming at me in big, black, capitalized font from the front of my newspaper. I genuinely thought a second depression was about to sweep the globe and my world would never be the same again. Even though I was later calmed down by my parents and assured, thanks mostly to Australia's trade relationship with China, among other things, that everything would be okay, and I wouldn't be eating out of old, unlabelled tins of preservatives for the foreseeable future. But I would be in for a rude awakening, no less than a decade later, as to how this catastrophe would impact my life and everyone else's for years to come. I had to learn to stop blaming myself for the shit I couldn't control and focus on what I could. I had to remind myself that I had been doing everything I could possibly do within my power and the circumstances I had been given, and refused to let anyone tell me that I wasn't trying. I had to regain that sense of unflinching determination that had gotten me through high school and university, because I needed it now more than ever before. At the time of writing this, I can tell you that the road to recovery has been long, but promising. I've been out of regular therapy for nearly 2 years without any ideating thoughts. I lost another job in mid-2017 that made me fear I was about to have a relapse, but I'm proud to say that that wasn't the case. The last few years, especially 2016 and 2017, have been hard, but nowhere near as debilitating as the latter half of 2015. I still have moments of bleakness and loneliness sometimes, but my depression continues to ebb, and if all goes as planned, I may be completely cured by the new year. I had an epiphany sometime in late 2017 after I lost my other job at a car dealership, and that was the realization that unless the world was going to recover from a decade's worth of damage that has left my generation perpetually unemployable tomorrow, I was going to have to take my chances as a freelancer if I had any hope of utilizing my actual skills and creativity to give myself the best chance at a fulfilling life that I could be proud of. I had heard of NICE, a government-funded program that helps train people who want to start their own business from people before. Trouble was, I was still hopelessly trying to convince other assholes to give me a job, so I never considered it. In truth, I was terrified of going freelance with so little experience. I still am. But I feel like I have no other choice in the matter. I have nothing left to lose and everything to gain. It's actually a bizarre privilege that I find myself in a stable enough position with welfare, being smart enough with what little savings I've managed to accumulate, and the continued support of my parents, plus the advent of the internet with thousands of potential clients at the push of a button, that I have a real shot at making this work. It couldn't be any worse than the bullshit song and dance I've been doing for the past 6 years trying to get a job the conventional way and not getting anywhere. Why not get off the damn hamster wheel and try something different? I'm tired of being discriminated for not being able to magically give myself experience for the kind of things I know I'm capable of. And if I can't convince anyone to give me a job, perhaps I'll have better luck creating my own instead. There is no greater moment in time, thanks to the availability of technology, to not at least take a stab at it. And, well, fuck, I don't see any other alternatives besides continuing down the same routine I've been doing and expect shit to change. Now, the catch regarding getting into the NICE program that people didn't tell me, I had to learn this from the woman who cuts my hair during small talk, is that they are much more likely to take you on board if you have things already in motion, at least as best as you can. If you can show that you've technically already started, you're in. That means getting a client. That hit hard and scared the shit out of me. After I finished hyperventilating, I thought about the kind of people who would be most likely to take me on based on just showing them what I could do, rather than having a lot of experience. At that point, a certain YouTuber came to mind. The Right Opinion. I had taken note of him maybe a few months back that he was an interesting case for a YouTuber who had a small army of editors working for him that he would credit at the end of every video. At first, I figured most of them were paid with exposure as small-time YouTubers themselves, needing that extra help. Ultimately, I figured even if he only paid me in peanuts, if I could at least get his name down on paper and have physical proof I had a client for at least one paying gig, it would be enough to get me into NICE. So, on November 1st, I sent him a Twitter DM, shyly asking if he would be interested in taking me on to edit a segment of a future video, even if it was just a one-time deal. I was completely transparent, mentioning NICE and how it would help me a great deal if he'd grant me the opportunity. Now James, being the upstanding gentleman that he is, gave me the first minute of one of his previous videos and told me to show him what I could do. Hours later, I sent him back the test video and landed him as a client and the invitation to join the team. He gave me the greatest early birthday present I could ever ask for. Video editing is not something I ever saw myself doing. The same thing can be said about most of my life in general at this point. Artistically though, I've found it immensely fascinating that a lot of the skills I developed in learning to be an animator were transferable to becoming an editor. Both disciplines required a sense of timing, pacing, understanding the importance of framing, and having an eye for specific tiny details. I've surprised myself by taking up something initially as a hobby with no real intentions of making any real use out of it, beyond simple expression, and turning it into something viable that I can actually sell to people across the internet. And if I can sell this skill that's only really starting to shine through, imagine what I can do with the ones I've already honed. I have no illusions that what I'm setting myself up for will be easy. I remember attending a lecture by a graphic artist back at university around 2010 who pretty much scared me away from even considering doing freelance work. In retrospect, that's a pretty rubbish lecture, and I sure hope that guy didn't get too many more university lecturing gigs after that one. But with my back to the wall, I feel like this is my best option, and nothing worth having or doing comes easy. Starting work with James, and possibly other YouTubers and clients in the near future, excites me, and his gift of helping me increase my chances with the niece program just makes me feel, for what feels like the first time in just so damn long, actually hopeful about my future again. I feel like I have another chance to prove myself to the world. I feel a sense of purpose again, that I can channel that drive I've reunited with and focus it on something tangible again, something real. I might finally have the chance to cut the chains of welfare off, be able to afford to move out of home and gain some much needed independence, and just feel like things are moving forward again. That is what this is ultimately about. Why I'm saying all this and why I made this video. Some of you may come away from this thinking it was self-indulgent and ultimately pointless, while there may be others who either dealt with or are currently dealing with the struggles I laid out in this video. You are the people this video is for. I want you to know that all that pain, suffering, and disenfranchisement, it won't kill you unless you let it. We have been dealt a terrible hand in the world's shittiest game of poker, but we still have to play if there's even the slightest chance of winning even the smallest amount. I kept telling myself that there was no shame in feeling lost as long as I kept striving to do something about it. No matter how many times I was shoved aside and kicked to the curb, I always got back up. And now, I think I've found something that just might be my ticket to getting back that much needed feeling of progress that I've been missing for so long. And it doesn't feel like my life is at a standstill anymore. I've been given permission to live again.